Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity for us to be here to present our work. My name is Affie Ellis. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation, and I'm also a citizen of Wyoming. I was appointed to the commission by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and it has been an honor for me to serve on this commission. I want to thank my fellow commissioners. I know you're watching online, and we certainly wish you were here with us today. But I also want to pay special thanks to all the people that we met in the field over the course of the last 3 years. They shared with us some very personal and sometimes very difficult information. And it wasn't always easy to hear what they had to say, but we appreciate your candor and your honesty. As has been noted very much today, there have been a lot of efforts to make Native America safer and more just. And I want to thank all the members of this committee for being here and for supporting those efforts. In particular, I want to thank Senator Barrasso for supporting my nomination to this commission and for supporting our hearing today. Wyoming is very lucky to have you. When we first met to work on our report, we didn't know what the final product was going to look like, but we had a few guiding principles. First, we pledged to listen to the people that we met, and it was these people that defined the scope of what we talked about in our report. We were also interested in writing a report that said something, that actually said something, and wouldn't just be a document that sat on a shelf accumulating dust. And by the end of our field hearings, when we started putting pen to paper, we decided we wanted to speak with a unified voice. We didn't want a report that had a majority recommendation with dissenting views. And the reason for this is very simple. These issues are too important. In short, people are dying, people are suffering, and our report was written in a unified voice with those people in mind. Indian Country Today, as many of you may have seen, wrote a story about our report, and they described it as radical, revolutionary, exceptional, or just plain common sense. And I'm not a fancy gal. I'm a nice Navajo person from Wyoming. So I like the term common sense to best describe our recommendations and our work. And in short, we called for more local tribal control over law enforcement issues. When we were out in the field, we saw a lot of bright spots where tribes were working with state and federal partners. They'd invested in hiring more tribal police. They invested in detention facilities to meet the needs of their citizens. They were investing in tribal courts that were familiar with their clients, as our fellow commissioner, Judge Polly, likes to call defendants before her court. And they paid close attention to rehabilitation needs. And when the commission saw areas where things were working, we kept hearing one thing over and over. Look what we are doing. Rarely did we hear, I'd say never did we hear, look what other people, the federal government, is doing for us. Our commission thus views tribal governments as playing the lead role in strengthening tribal justice. And we recognize that tribes have a lot of challenges and that they've got to continue to develop internal capacities to become more self-determined across all tribal justice functions. This isn't easy, we know this, but it can and must be done. Lack of law enforcement remains a problem in many places in Indian Country, particularly Alaska. We know boots-on-the-ground law enforcement is essential for reducing crime. Our report talks about HPPG and how increased law enforcement in certain areas has made a difference. In other words, it's saving lives. We all know that, though, that increasing law enforcement and other services requires funding. Accordingly, we recommend structural changes within the federal government to reduce confusion and redundancy by transferring law enforcement duties within the Department of Interior to the Department of Justice. Our report highlights one instance where DOJ funds were available to build a detention facility in Indian Country, but the building sat empty because no funds were appropriated through the DOI budget. We also recommend base-level funding after repeatedly hearing about how grant-based funding is not a good match for Indian Country's needs. Some tribes, we've heard, struggle to write the winning application because they don't have the human capital to complete those applications. And more problematically, we hear about grants coming and going because a program will get money and then run out of funds. But I think what's most troubling is that grants reflect the federal government's idea about what works in Indian Country rather than trusting tribes to make those decisions on their own. Our report is very lengthy, and I do want to apologize that my good friend Ivan Posey could not be here today. He provided some very meaningful testimony about some efforts at Wind River to address juvenile justice. We urge the committee to continue to look at our report with a fine-tooth comb to see what works in your particular areas. And we want to thank all the tribes that welcomed us to their reservations, and particularly Alaska. We visited some extremely remote villages and were welcomed by very gracious people. So while we have huge challenges that remain, I just want to thank everyone for your continued interest and commitment to reducing crime in Native America and in Native Alaska villages. Thank you so much, and I'm just going to say I appreciate the opportunity to present before my esteemed colleague, the chairman of the commission, Troy Ide. Thank you.